Good morning, or depending on when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now this week we have got a little bit of news, not very much, but a little bit. I'm going to, after taking a little week off last week, I'm going to take you through my updated internationals nationals results, with obviously my tallied totals and the analysis and the things that I've drawn from looking at those figures in a fair amount of detail. We have got another 2 interviews from UK Worlds qualifiers coming up on this show today. Mr. Charlie Powell and Mr. Alex Dow shall be joining us to talk about the usual things like how they got into Pokemon and how they qualified for Worlds this past year, as well as anything else they wish to talk about, to be honest with you. And we're also I've had a little rant on here for a little while, and I saw something today that made me, shall we say, a teensy bit angry, so I'm going to have a little bit of a rant later, but more on that when we get to it nice and naturally. So, what we see in terms of news this week is not a huge amount, but it has been announced that there is going to be a side event at US Nationals that allows them to get championship points. It's going to happen on the Saturday and Sunday, and essentially they can, it's called a Championship Point Challenge. It's $20 to enter, and it's a standard straight Swiss. All entrants receive an exclusive Pokemon US Nationals playmat, which really sucks because you get that for free in the US. Well, not for free, but you get it for entering the tournament, which costs you $20. But in the UK, we're not, or any other country for that matter, not only are we not going to get it, but we're only going to be able to buy it from people who entered this tournament, making it exclusive, making it expensive, I should say. And for somebody like me that enjoys collecting the playmats, that's a little bit annoying, but never mind. And what it says, championship points are awarded per regional championship point schedules. Falls in regional SPT best finish limits, seating limited to the first 256 Masters, 128 Seniors, 128 Juniors. This is happening on the Saturday and on the Sunday of Nationals, which means if you're already out of Nationals by the Saturday, you can join. If you're out for the Sunday, you can join. Now, you are allowed to enter both of them, because one's on the Saturday, one's on the Sunday, and it will cost you $40 to do so, but you will be able to enter both of them. Now, it does count towards your best finish limit for states, provincials, territorials, so, a regional, state, provincial, territorial, blah, blah, blah. So what that means is if you've already maxed out your best finish limit, which I believe is 4 for states and regionals, or provincials, or territorials, or whatever you want to call them, then this isn't going to get you any more points. What it does mean is it once again, for the second year in a row, gives the US players an unfair advantage over the rest of the world, in that they get these 2 extra opportunities. Was even worse than last year, or better if you're American. It gives you 2 extra opportunities to get those last few points you need to qualify for Worlds. Now, admittedly, I believe, if it's like it was last year, and I believe it is, you will be able to enter this whether you're American or not. But of course, if you're not American, getting to Indianapolis, Indiana is going to be a lot more awkward than if you are American. I can't remember if I said how unfair this was last year, but I can imagine that I did. The playmat thing's a little bit annoying, and this isn't actually the rant I was planning, it's just kind of turning a bit into one. I don't like the fact that American players and only American players are being given an extra advantage. It basically means that if you're American, you stand a greater chance of qualifying for Worlds than in any other country because you're given these extra events. Now, admittedly, the competition in America is higher. There are more players. Their regionals tend to be bigger. Their state championships tend to be bigger. So you could argue that this kind of evens the playing field. But of course, generally when states are going on, you can pick your poison, and regionals, there's an opportunity to go to a lot of regionals. Maybe you could argue that in places like the UK, and especially in mainland Europe, where you can hit many different countries, France, Belgium, Germany, etc., that you can actually hit far more regionals than you could in the US, so it's only fair to give them an extra 2. But it's the timing of this that kind of gets to me. It's, oh, I haven't done well at Nationals, I've still got a shot. Whereas for everybody else, it's, well, never mind. I'm not going to get a chance. The other important thing to note here is that anyone that does well in US Nationals won't be entering these. Anyone that's already got their invite won't be entering these. Though I believe they could, but I don't see any reason why you would pay $20 to enter these unless you really want the playmat. So these are not only going to be 2 regional level events, but they're going to be regional level events which are less competitive than the average US regional, because essentially all of the really good players aren't going to enter these. So that's a little bit frustrating. It's not the end of the world if you're outside of the US. If you're inside the US, this is undeniably a wonderful thing. 2 extra opportunities to get those championship points you need. Now, speaking of nationals, something very, very important, and I imagine that most of you have actually seen this, but just in case you haven't, online registration is required for US nationals. You will not be able to register there. You have to sign up online. Not only that, but I believe there is no chance to actually pay in cash on the day. Make sure you sign up in advance. And the last piece of news we've got, actually no, there is a couple little bits of news that have literally gone up on particular websites as I look, so let's look at them very, very quickly. Horlicher and Pikachu promos are coming out at the Japanese McDonald's. I mean, they're terrible, but they look kind of cool. Just don't worry about it. And the first 2 English language cards from Furious Fists have been announced. They are Lucario EX and Mega Lucario EX. It's kind of irrelevant, to be honest. We knew they were coming. The attacks are like we knew they were. The artwork's like we knew they were. So just don't worry, pretty little heads about it. They're out there. I thought you should know. Now, the last piece of news, and this is not necessarily just come out in the last couple of days, but I haven't shared it yet, so I thought I would. The commentators for US Nationals and Worlds have been announced. They are Dylan Exabyte Mayo, Josh Jaywitz Wittenkeller, Jose Crims Rojano, and Kyle Puka Sukovic. Now, on the one hand, this is good. Dylan Mayo, I don't know him too well, but I know he's active on the forums and such online, and I believe he entered last year, so that's got to be a good thing. Jaywitz, of course, is famous from his YouTube videos, and he did some commentary last year, so that's got to be a good thing. Jose Rojano, or however you pronounce it, sorry dude if you're listening, or anyone that knows him, Jose Rojano, or I don't really know, I'm just going to stop saying his name to be honest with you. He did it last year, and the new addition there is Karl Sukovic of the Top Cut, who of course is a lovely chap who we have had on the podcast. When I went to Worlds 2012 I grabbed him for an interview, and I'm hoping to grab him for a Skype interview at some point in the future. Now that I am doing these interviews, he did agree in principle a while ago, so hopefully we'll get him on in the near future. But he's going to be doing it, and with the amount of videos that he does, the website that he runs, I mean, he does an awful lot for the community. So I am all in favour of those gentlemen doing it. The one thing that I would, however, say is that I'm still entirely against opening the World Championships only open to US commentators. Now, US Nationals, I have no problem with this. Why should US people not commentate at US Nationals? Certainly, if there is a commentary position going at UK Nationals this year, then I would obviously be looking to go for that. And if an American were given that over me, that would get to me somewhat. Why should an American be commentating at the UK National Championships? So, of course, why should an Englishman or someone from another country be commentating at US Nationals? But really, if we want to make it the World Championships, and we want an inclusive World Championships, accommodating people from around the world, we should not only have commentators from the US. I think that's a mistake. Next year, when they start looking for commentators, if they do, I will be throwing my hat into the ring, and I'll be launching somewhat of a social media campaign. I've already had about a dozen people suggest this to me, and hopefully I'll be calling on some support, trying to get, and not even necessarily for me, although I'd like that, but just for at least one non-US person to be commentating at Worlds next year. It is the World Championships. It's bad enough that it's always held in the US, except the one time they went marginally over the border, and the fact that they give, a greater chance to the US people to get in due to these kind of last chance events. Let's make it fully international. Well, I'm really going on the ranting today. If you're up for a ranting podcast, ladies and gentlemen, it appears that you've got one. Lucky you. So yeah, those people are on it, and they're good people. I hope they're not just installed as the people for every year going forward. Not because they're not good people, because they are, and not because they haven't done a lot for the community, because they have, and not because they're not deserving, because I'm sure they are. It's just because I don't want to see the World Championship staffed entirely by American people. because that kind of devalues it as a world championship. If you disagree or agree with me, as always, tweet me at @TheWassy or email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk. I do love hearing all of your opinions. And it's not really news per se, but I should let you know that the YouTube channel, and you can find this at youtube.com/user/PTCGRadio, or by going on to YouTube and searching for PTCG Radio, or by going onto Google and searching for PTCG Radio YouTube. That is up and rolling now. I'm building it quite nicely. The subscribers are going up, the views are going up. It's all very nice. In the past week, there have been a couple of videos of how Plasma can take down Powell. There's been a deck breakdown of Weavile, and hopefully by the time this podcast is up on YouTube, if not everywhere else, there'll be at least a second Weavile video. There is a deck breakdown of Flygon Dusknoir Excelgor going up soon, as well as a couple other videos featuring Weavile and TDK that you'll be able to see in all of their glory. And videos will be going up at the rate of, it's currently looking at about 5 to 7 a week, not including the PTCG radio. So I think that's got to be a good thing. So, moving into international nationals. Now, I've done my usual thing and done a tally. Now, I don't have the Canadian National Championship results in front of me, so I may have to go through them next week. But for the time being, in the couple of weeks since I last went through this, here are the national championships which have occurred. We have had the Finnish National Championship. That was won by Yveltal, and the top cut consisted of 5 Yveltal, 1 Plasma, 1 Blastoise, and 1 Miltank with Greninja. We have had the Mexican National Championship, and this was won by Yveltal. And the top cut consisted of 4 Yveltal, 1 Blastoise, 1 Aromatisse, 1 Pyroar, and 1 Big Basics. We had the Malaysian National Championship, which was won by Yveltal, and had a top cut of 4 Yveltal, 1 Plasma, 1 Virizion, 1 Weavile, and 1 Charizard Raichu, strangely. We had the Dutch National Championship over in the Netherlands, not Holland, which was won by Virizion Genesect, and had a top cut of 1 Yveltal, 2 Virizion Genesect, 1 Aromatisse, 1 Palkia, 2 Plasma, and 1 Pyroar. So nice bit of variety there. Over in New Zealand, the National Championship was won by Yveltal, and had a top cut of 4 Yveltal, 2 Plasma, 1 Trevenant Excelgor, and 1 Aromatisse based around Klinklang. In Portugal, we had a win by Virizion Genesect, and the top cut consisted of 2 Yveltal, 3 Virizion Genesect, 1 Plasma, 1 Aromatisse, and 1 Big Basics. Interesting to note there that I believe the 2012 World Champion Igor Costa managed to get second at that particular National Championship, which means I don't know if Portugal gets 2 paid invites or 1, but if it does get a paid invite, this will mark the 3rd year in a row that Igor Costa has not had to pay to go to Worlds, because in 2012 he went as a national champion, in 2013 he went as a defending world champion, both paid for, and if he's got a paid trip this year, that's 3 in a row. It would be lovely to be as good at Pokemon as him, although he did play Yveltal at Nationals, which just sounds a bit boring to me. And over in South Africa, we had the winner, which was shockingly Yveltal, and the top cut was 2 Yveltal, 3 Virgin, 1 Charizard, 1 Plasma, and coming second, the last year's South African champion, friend of the podcast, Brian Murdoch, with Greninja Miltank. I was chatting to him by email a little bit before the National Championships. I basically suggested he don't play against with Greninja Miltank. Clearly, I was wrong. Or maybe he's just that damn good. Did lose to Yveltal Garbodor in the final, so I don't know how much of an issue that was. Maybe we need to look into getting him on the podcast in the near future to tell us about his South African success. So, where does that leave us? Now, in terms of winners, we've gone up to 11 Yveltal, 3 Plasma, 3 Virizion Genesect, and 2 Pyroar-based decks, meaning that Yveltal has more winners by about 50% than all other decks combined. If we look at total top cuts, we see Yveltal decks cutting 63 times, cutting 19 of the 19 tournaments. We see Virizion Genesect with 24 top cuts, which is not much more than a third. I mean, 21 would be a third of Yveltal's. Virgin only has 24, which is marginally above 1/3 of Eviltal's cuts, cutting 13 of the 19 tournaments. And we see Plasma with 19 top cuts, cutting, I believe, about, again, 13 of the 19 tournaments. The other top cuts, we see 9 Aromatisse, 7 Miltank, 5 Pyroar, 4 Blastoise, 3 Big Basics, 3 Trevenant, 1 Palkia, 1 Raybor, 1 Aggron, 1 Flareon, 1 Garchomp, 2 Weavile, 1 Flygon Dusknoir, and 1 Charizard Raichu. And that is the up-to-date, full, unadulterated list of what's been doing well at Nationals. Not including Canadian Nationals, which I thought happened last weekend. But to be honest with you, I don't have the results in front of me, so like I said, I will have to add that in for you next week. So, what can we see from this? Well, Plasma cut 6 of the 7 tournaments that we saw here. So Plasma is cutting a lot. Virizion Genesect only cut 4 of the 7, but it won 2 of them, taking its win total from 1 all the way up to 3. So it won 1 of the first 12, but 2 of the next 7. There were 2 Charizard and 2 Pyroar cutting in 7 tournaments. Not only that, but as I said, Virizion Genesect had a bunch of top cuts, and it had 2 wins. So if we take all of that together, what we can see, I reckon, quite categorically, if you will, is that Fire decks are not beating Virizion Genesect out. Virizion Genesect remains a strong play, despite the amount of Fire decks that everybody thinks is going to be out running around. Running around, I should say. I just don't see the success there, and that goes back to my thoughts about it being kind of generally inconsistent. We also see that there are 2 Miltank cutting this past couple of weeks, another Weavile and a couple of Blastoise, and a small resurgence of Aromatisse, 4 cuts in the first 12 tournaments and 5 in the next 7. 5 in the first 12 and 4 in the next 7. I don't know whether we can necessarily see this as a full-on resurgence, but it's nice to see it doing all right. In terms of my advice and what these national championships show you, to be perfectly honest, ladies and gentlemen, what these show you are quite simply that there are only 3 decks that are consistently doing well. And other people have got their opinions, and that's lovely. But there are only 3 decks that we know are consistently doing well, and they are Virizion, Genesect, and Plasma, which at this point, they've had 3 wins each, and Virigen's had 24 cuts to Plasma's 19, but Plasma's cut a couple more tournaments. Truth be told, there really isn't very much to choose between them at all at this stage. And Eviltal is by far and away the top deck. Now, a lot of people recently have been cutting them into Eviltal Raichu and Eviltal Garbodor. I haven't been, but one thing which I think is interesting is that out of the 5 victories Eviltal Garbodor got in the past couple of weeks, 5 of them were Raichu variants and only 1 of them was a Garbodor variant. Now, I was having an interesting conversation with my friend recently, and what we were suggesting was that maybe time is ripe for a Blastoise comeback, or a Raybor comeback. Because one thing that we're seeing at the moment is a lot less Garbodor being played as people are playing Raichu. Because essentially, nobody's playing these decks that get screwed over by Garbodor quite so badly, so I'm going to drop Garbodor to have an edge in the mirror. And that opened a door for Blastoise to come back. And I know a lot of people are saying, ah-ha-ha, but Druddigon's a good counter, and yes, it is. But if you drop it early, they're going to Lassonde it, so you need to have the Druddigon and the DCE in hand or be able to fetch it the turn you need it. And not only that, but if your opponent's going aggro Black Kyurem EX, it's going to be fantastic when you get the first KO with Druddigon, but then what are you going to do when your Druddigon goes down? I don't think Blastoise is necessarily going to win US Nationals or Worlds, but it's something interesting to consider. Most people are only playing 1 Druddigon, and 1 Druddigon will not beat Blastoise. And people are starting to move towards Eviltal Raichu rather than Eviltal Garbodor, so that they can have an edge in the mirror, and I suppose rightly so. But both of these facts are just creaking the door open for Blastoise to come back in. Now, As always, any questions, anything you want to argue with, etc., email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, tweet me at the Wassy, or indeed, now that these are going up on YouTube, and YouTube is getting more and more popular as a way to watch the podcast. I mean, we've had 69, humorously, people watching it last week and 83 the week before. So it is starting to gain traction within YouTube. So if you're listening on YouTube, just drop a comment down below. So that is, my thoughts on Nationals and where we stand. Next week, obviously, I believe Nationals is this coming weekend. So next week, I will be back with all the results from US Nationals. Don't forget, of course, that is being streamed on Twitch. So do look out for that. If I'm around Saturday evening, which I think I may well be, there's a good chance I'll be watching it. So I suggest you all come and do the same. So, one of the things, and I don't like to disparage other writers very often, I'm not going to do anybody by name, but I think sometimes harmful advice is going out there on the internet, and I saw this today. Now, I shan't tell you who the writer is, and I shan't tell you what website this is from. What I will tell you is that the writer is quite well respected within the community, and it's a website which I admire and have a lot of time for. As I've told you, I read what I consider to be all the good Pokemon blogs and websites, so I catch up everything. And here's the quote. In my mind, the correct amount of supporters for the majority of decks in the format is 11 and a Powell pad. I think public opinion is also pretty close to my own. And my response to that is, no! For the love of God, no! Seriously, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry if that was a bit loud. I cannot stress how bad this advice is. My thought has always been 13 supporters as an absolute minimum. 15 is your optimum. Because if you're playing, and this particular person was playing 10 supporters, how can you expect to draw well with 10 supporters? 1 in 6 of your cards is a supporter. So if you draw 7 cards, that does not necessarily give you a great chance drawing a supporter turn 1. If you don't draw a supporter turn 1, you're going to be behind in the game. Now, Powell Pad sounds like a fantastic idea mid to late game. And you'll notice, if you're watching my YouTube videos, I am starting to become a fan of Powell Pad. I'm starting to put it in my decks. I'm putting it in TDK. I love Powell Pad. Mid to late game. Sticking 2 ends back into your deck for if your opponent takes a big lead, wonderful. Sticking 2 Chorus or a Chorus and a Juniper into your deck so you don't draw dead off an end late game, adding consistency to a late game, fantastic. Putting Lassonde or Blacksmith back into your deck so that you can use them late game, and they're cards which will get you the win if you play them at the right time, yes. Powell Pad does not add early game consistency to your deck, so don't play it if that's the aim. Powell Pad will be nice late game, but the fact of the matter is, if you're playing 11 supporters, you are going to whiff. And you are going to whiff more than you like. And if you're playing 11 supporters in your deck, I don't want to hear any complaints about drawing dead. You haven't drawn dead, you've built a bad deck. And you've built a deck which is not good enough or consistent enough to do well. Now, some people might be saying, yes, I play 11, but I play Jirachi. Doesn't count. Because you can start with Jirachi. And you will occasionally start with Jirachi. And in that game, you start with Jirachi, it's not an issue. You're playing 10 supporters. Or you might prize Jirachi, which is going to happen on average 1 in every 10 games. And if you say that you're going to be playing, 9 rounds at US Nationals, 3 games per round, or say 2.5 games per round, let's say you're playing 20 games, that means 2 of those games you got no Jirachi, because it's going to be prized. And if one of those games, 1 in 10, it's going to be, so you're looking at probably 3, 4, 5 games in a tournament at a minimum, where Jirachi is either going to be prized, or it's going to be your active Pokemon, so you can't use it. Not only that, but if I put Jirachi down early game, there's a Lassonde cat target for my opponent, and he's not going to take it early game, but they're going to be his last 2 prizes. And for the record, as a little tip, if your opponent benches a Jirachi, don't kill it early game, because that frees up a bench space and it frees you up to the end. If your opponent puts down a Jirachi, what you want to do is save your Lassonde, Catcher, Red Signal, etc., and then that should be your last 2 prizes. Maybe you're running short of resources, and you only need to do 90 damage, makes it easier. It stops you being end quite so low until late game, and of course, it takes up a bench space that your opponent would probably want for something else. So I don't buy Jirachi as a consistency boost, because you got to put it on your bench. It doesn't work if your opponent's got Garbodor out, and it's an easy 2 prizes. Go back to what I said on both my Weavile deck breakdown and my, I believe my deck breakdown for the Malaysian National Championship deck, where I talked about Jirachi in a bit more detail. So I don't buy Jirachi and I don't buy Powell Pad, and this particular person wasn't even playing Computer Search to the best of my knowledge, because they talked about how good Dowsing Machine was. So at the end of the day, even Computer Search, I like Computer Search as a safety net. So if I'm playing 15 supporters and a Computer Search, that's kind of nice for me. But the fact of the matter is, Dowsing Machine does not add consistency early game. Dowsing Machine gives you options mid to late game. Dowsing Machine gives you an extra Juniper, but it doesn't give you a Juniper turn 1 if you open with it. So I don't buy that. Now, you can add things like Bicycle, but honestly, I think you can afford to play 12 supporters if you're also playing free Bicycle. 12 and 2 I would not consider to be good enough. 13 and 2 I would. 12 and 3 I would. And that's if you can run through your deck. So a deck like Plasma or Evital that you can generally play a lot of cards early, Bike becomes a little bit better. But if you're running around with 10 supporters or 12 supporters or even 13 supporters including Bicycle, so say 11 and 2, your deck is not going to be terribly consistent. Powell Pad doesn't count, Jirachi doesn't count. And Computer Search counts to some degree, because that does give you an out turn 1. Now I will say, and I said this in my Weavile deck breakdown, I would consider that 2 Jirachi counts. But you really want to be running the risk of playing 2 Jirachi, and if you're playing a Scoop Up Cyclone, then Jirachi counts even more. So that's just terrible advice, and I like to think that the people listening to my podcast are a little bit smarter and you're after good advice, so take it from me. And I am in regular contact with world's competitors, national champions and all that good stuff, and I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, those people, when they qualified for Worlds, were not playing 11 or 10 supporters. 11 and a Powell Pad is terrible. Now, it's not going to be in time for this particular podcast, but I'm going to be hopefully interviewing 2 UK Worlds qualifiers a week until I run out of them or they start saying no. And I'm going to start asking them about consistency and about 11 supporters, because I'm willing to bet that the majority of them don't think 11 supporters is enough. It's terrible advice, and if you come across somebody telling you that, don't do it. Look at what happened when I played the Malaysian National Championship winning deck. There weren't enough supporters, and I won. But I wasn't winning because my deck was running perfectly. I was winning in spite of my clunky deck. Don't do it, ladies and gentlemen. 13 as an absolute minimum, not including bicycles. I would say 13 plus a couple of bikes, or 12 plus 3 bikes. That is a support account you should be running. Feel free to ignore me, but if you draw dead, don't blame me. Now, to finish off the podcast this week, you're going to hear lovely interviews from my good friends Charlie Powell and Alex Dow, who both very nicely agreed to come on the podcast this week. And as always, for anyone that gives up their time to contribute and help with the podcast, a huge thank you to those 2 gentlemen, because they didn't have to give up their time to talk to me, and I'm very gracious that they did. Now, I present the interviews to you without editing, so there's a couple of pauses and a couple of ums and ahs here and there. I don't want to polish these interviews down to perfection. I want you to hear the conversation I had with them. Like the previous week, we're not rushing through anything. It's not 2 minutes at the end of a tournament. We have 8 to 10 minutes of conversation. It goes quite nicely. I think they're good interviews. If I didn't, I wouldn't be presenting them to you. It's as simple as that. So I hope you enjoy them, and if you've got any questions about anything, do get back to me. The one thing I will tell you before we get going, the first person you're going to hear today is Charlie, and he's going to talk about playing Kling Klang last format. And you heard Mao talk about Kling Klang last week. So just as a little bit of background knowledge, Kling Klang, there were 2 Kling Klang cards that people were playing. One allowed you to move metal energy around, kind of like Aromatisse does for fairy energy. I believe that one's been rotated out. And then there's a Plasma Kling Klang, which I believe is still in the format, and it must be in the format because it came out after Plasma Storm. And that gave your metal Pokemon immunity from EXs. And this time last year we had an incredibly EX-heavy format. And generally, the way the deck worked was you played it with a bunch of Max Potion, and then you would get both Kling Klangs up, and you would be attacking with something like Cobalion, or lesser extent Registeel, or Cobalion EX, or something like that. And then you would be immune to EXs, and if they didn't one-hit you, you'd move the energy around, Max Potion moves the energy back, job's a good 'un. And bear in mind, this was when Garbodor was not seeing a huge amount of play at all. It's sort of a bit of play. Dylan Bryan saw some success of it, and there were a couple of Darkrai Garbodor floating around last year, but it wasn't anywhere near as much as we've been seeing throughout this season. And what happened was, at US Nationals, Gothitelle, and it's the same kind of Gothitelle deck that's been running around, or Trevenant Excelgor, was doing really, really well and won. And Klinklang basically had a near auto loss to Gothitelle, because Gothitelle could hit it, and it got poisoned and paralysed, and it just couldn't really do anything about it. So it had an almost auto loss to Gothitelle. But after Gothitelle won US Nationals, everybody started countering Gothitelle by playing multiple Caldeo in their Darkrai lists, or some things of that nature. And then all of a sudden, Gothitelle became a really bad play, and that was the worst matchup for Klinklang. So Klinklang became a pretty darn good play. There's the background you need to know. You're going to hear interviews from Charlie Powell and then Alex Dow, and I'll meet you on the other side to say goodbye. Enjoy. Alright, I'm here with Charlie Powell, one of the UK players who has qualified for Worlds this year. Good evening, Charlie.
Hello.
Now, I'm going to start off with, as I've been asking everybody with this little series, take us through the beginning. How did you actually get into playing the Pokemon card game initially?
Well, I've always been, kind of a fan of the game, like, as most of us probably did. Collected the cards when I was a kid, but didn't really know that there was any kind of game really associated with it, I guess. I don't know. 2 years ago, me and my brother just kind of decided to get a structure deck each and see what it was all about, and it just kind of panned out from there. We went to a couple of leagues. It was really fun. He unfortunately didn't take it much further, but I really enjoyed it and got into tournaments. Luckily, it was right at the beginning of a season, the 2012 to 2013 season. So I was able to pick up the game and start earning championship points straight away.
That's all right for some. Now, like a lot of people I've been speaking to, you haven't actually been playing very long, yet you've seen kind of fairly immediate success. What's that due to? How has that happened so quickly for you, do you think?
Well, I'm not sure. I guess I just had really good mentors and good practice partners. As you probably know, Tom Hall, Sammy Sakum, Tamal Cameron. I met all of them pretty quickly from when I started playing the game, and they were all really good teachers for the most part. And there's a couple of names that I haven't said. George Boone, Tommy Roberts. Just lots of people, and it was just a really good learning process, going to high level events kind of relatively quickly. So yeah.
Sweet. Well, I'm sure anyone you've forgotten a name won't hold it against you. And to say, living in the UK, you couldn't really get much of a better kind of group of teachers and the people you've just named. So you haven't seen a huge amount of different formats, I suppose, but do you have a favourite deck, something that you really enjoyed playing more than anything else so far?
Well, it's got to be Rails from last format. I earned something like 250 championship points on the back of that deck alone, and it was just a real pleasure to play. And then another one that I guess I would say would be Klinklang, because that would be where my first kind of regional appearance was at. The Exeter Regional in winter 2012. That was my first good showing at a regional.
Okay.
Second place, and then I finished off the season getting top 32 at Worlds with that same deck, although that's with the Plasma Klinklang.
Indeed. Depressingly, I've yet to actually score that high at a regional, so cheers for that. To talk us through this season, first of all, then we'll get on to last year's Worlds in a minute, but talk us through this season. How did you go about qualifying? What did you play? Where did you earn your points from? Because if I'm not mistaken, it was a championship point invite that you ended up with.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't actually attend nationals at all, so it was all off the back of just trotting around the country and doing all the CP events, basically. It was a bit of an odd season. I did get a top 4 at one of the winter regionals, but aside from that, I didn't see much success until the spring regionals, because I was trying out, various things over the city championship circuit, and came away from that with only 20 points. So mostly it was spring regionals that I got the points from.
So really just a good run at one set of regionals, and that kind of took you home.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I must admit, you were somewhat of an inspiration to me, because as anyone that's listened to this podcast even fleetingly knows, I had quite a love for Flareon this season, and I believe that was a deck you piloted to a top 4 finish at the Winter Regionals down in Cornwall.
That's right.
So I suppose I should thank you for that one. So, am I correct in thinking this will be your second World Championships?
Yeah.
So tell us about last year then, because you had him, and we've already spoken to Tamal Cameron on last week's podcast, and you and he, shall we say, teamed up just a little bit last year.
Yeah, that's right. We actually played a deck that was one card off of each other. He gave me the list the night before the tournament, actually, and I changed one card in it, which was a Clang, and I changed that to another switch, I believe, because I wanted that extra kind of utility. But yeah, essentially that they were the exact same deck.
Because he says he had to convince you somewhat to actually play that deck.
That's right. It was a bit of an odd run-up to Worlds, where I was playing lots and lots of rogue things, trying to figure out something a bit too clever to play for Worlds. Even the couple of days in Vancouver, playtesting against other competitors, I was still using stuff like Ninetales Amoonguss or Speed Mewtwo Deoxys, and really, really, really silly stuff like that. And it came to the day before where I just didn't really have anything solid, except for Klinklang, which was suggested by Tamal. And at first I wasn't sure, because it does have an awful matchup against Gothitelle, and which we all know was the best deck coming out of US Nationals.
Yes, won the entire event, if I remember correctly, after
yeah.
taking down Norway before that.
But as the metagame developed to kind of counter it, Klinklang became better and better, which I kind of figured. Why not give it a go?
Yeah, a bit of a rock, paper, scissors thing. It loses to Gothitelle, so everyone counters Gothitelle, and it beats the Gothitelle counters, and takes an auto loss to a deck that nobody's playing because everyone else is countering it.
Yep.
That makes perfect sense. So, you haven't been playing a huge amount of time. You've seen fairly quick success, qualified for two World Championships in a row now. Are there any plans to slow down in the future, or are we full speed ahead next year like we've been for the last couple?
Well, we'll see how Worlds goes. I'd love to keep playing. Obviously, I love the game. I do fairly well at it, I suppose. And I have a lot of fun. So, we'll see.
Superb. And rather than ask about what happened at the ECC, I'll just say thank you very much for giving us your time.
Okay.
Alright, joining me now from his university library, we have Alex now, who's booked a study room specially for this interview, which officially makes him more effort than all the rest of the interviewees. How you doing, Alex?
Yeah, not too bad. How you doing, Ross?
Pretty well myself. So I'm going to start off with the early question, the easy one that I've been asking everybody else. How did you actually get into this whole Pokemon game? What got you started?
Well, I guess like as every other young kid, we all grew up either playing or not playing, collecting the cards, or sort of just watching on TV. But it was down to a good mate of mine, a very good friend of mine, I've known him for ages now, Oliver Fenley. He qualified for Worlds last year, so he went to Vancouver. I was on a ski trip with him actually, and he was busy writing his deck list, and I had no idea what he was doing, and I just saw these names of Pokemon that sort of like Mewtwo's. I was like, what the hell are you doing there? And then ended up sort of following him to a Pokemon tournament, which was, I think it was at London Cities actually. It was my first tournament, roughly late January last year, I believe. So ended up going to that, met a few of the others, like Jake, for the first time, and was just kind of hit with all this nostalgia of actually seeing all these Pokemon cards again, and it just became really fun. Like, I got hooked.
As do we all. It's interesting. Everyone I speak to is just like, well, obviously I collected as a kid. Like, why would you not?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who didn't? There are a lot of players that I know seem to be in like the early 20s or like mid 20s, and everyone sort of grew up with it. So everyone loves Pokemon. Everyone loves a bit of Pokemon. Really.
Everyone does love Pokemon. I'm with you on that one. So you say you've been playing since last January. So by my count, that gives you the end of last season, and then this season is your first full season. Would that be correct?
Yeah, exactly. So last year was just Oliver won a couple of tournaments, and he was going for his invite. So I sort of became his like designated driver and going with him to tournaments and just playing around, just having a bit of fun, just seeing how it is, just meeting everyone, I guess. Whilst he done his thing.
Lucky person. So you haven't seen particularly format changes, but in short time you've been playing, did you have a favourite deck, one that's done you better than any others?
Yeah, well, not done. It probably didn't actually do me too well, but the one I've had most fun playing was definitely Ray Eels, I guess. Considering Oliver built me a shocking Aspertia Eels deck as my first deck to play, not knowing any idea what I actually done in the first place. Did not have a clue what Dynamo had done. Kept trying to super rod for like a catcher. I don't know what was going on. But yeah, Ray Eels all the way. It was just so much fun to play. I mean, you got these little Dynamos which were just shocking to start with, but as soon as you just got going, it was just knocking everything out left, right, and centre, not even caring about anything at all.
That sounds fun. So this year, you got, if I'm not mistaken, you got your invite this year through championship points.
Yeah, that's correct.
Talk us through your season. How did you end up accruing all of them?
I think it began, we went, me and Oliver went to, I went to the Manchester Regionals and just completely flopped to that, playing a terrible Darkrai list. But we started to go, the first half of the season was actually really bad for me, in all honesty. The Regionals, I didn't generally do well. I think I just whiffed in 10th place at maybe St. Austell Regionals with Big Basics. But then we went to, the cities started to come round. So Aberdare cities was when, sort of the period of when Yeti was Plasma Snorlax, Lugia was sort of coming into play. And on a whim, I just built that deck and came second at Aberdare. Small tournament, but it was something, it kick-started my sort of championship points. And then I ended up taking a funny Yeti list with Crushing Hammers in it and winning Sutton Coldfield City Championships, which was my first win of this, like my Pokemon career, as it were. The second half of the season, I got a lot more into it. I mean, I travelled with you to ECC.
You did indeed.
Where we all celebrated our top 32s, and you done so much better than us.
I might have mentioned that once or twice on the podcast.
Yeah, you know, we're all good friends here. But yeah, I started playing Blastoise because I was just looking for a deck, which I started getting really bored of Pokemon after playing Plasma the whole time. So I was just playing Blastoise. The second half of the season, I actually started top cutting quite a lot of tournaments, regionals in particular, or just whiffing them. And I ended up also then playing the infamous Speed Lugia because of a certain Adam Hawkins, which I then took to Aberdare regionals, placed first there, and then I also piloted to first place in Edinburgh. So 2 regional wins. I
do remember that. Now again, and I suppose I can cut this bit out if you really want me to, but you know what's coming here, because we've had this conversation on a couple of occasions.
Yeah.
But I'm genuinely interested in your thought process here. After winning 2 regionals with Speed Lugia, you ended up taking Parisian Genesect to nationals. What was your reasoning behind that, rather than repeating or trying to repeat with the Speed Lugia?
Let's be clear, I did not take Parisian Genesect to nationals, but it basically playing Speed Lugia, although I done well with it, it's just if you don't run hot, you completely just sometimes fall apart. And I didn't really like that aspect of it, which has really sort of made me not want to play Speed Lugia at all. I have very bad I'm very indecisive about many things, in particular playing decks. I mean, when I first tried to play Speed Lugia, it was between that and Ray Ball, which is what I had built, and it was just a toss-up until the tournament, until I got there, actually. So, just on a whim, I thought, let's just try something that's supposed to be consistent. Not put too many techs in, and just try and play a legit Virizion Genesect, and yeah, unfortunately, it didn't work.
That's fair enough. I can't speak. I'm the person that took Virizion Genesect to Nationals purely to try and prove it took no skill to play, which is not the best reason for playing a deck.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, I think it's had like success over the course of the season in the UK, so like it's obviously it's one of the best decks out. So it's definitely just a reason for people to play it. I mean, it's quite simple in effect, but I guess there has to be some sort of skill in all decks, even with Speed Lugia and rolling heads on roller skates.
Well, yes, you got to hit them heads.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
this being your first Worlds, I mean, what kind of expectations do you have? What would be a good result?
In terms of actually the tournament itself?
Tournament result, what you're looking for, you know, what you're kind of expecting from going there?
To be honest, for the tournament, I'm not actually expecting too much. I'm going for the experience. Like, I've heard so many great things about the different tournaments. I mean, talking to the other people who went to the ECC, they were saying this is small in comparison to Worlds. So, like, Tommy Roberts, George Boone, just having a chat with them, Tamal as well. I just want to be involved just for one time, well, possibly, maybe more, hopefully, fingers crossed, but one time in my life, just be involved, enjoy the experience, get what I can out of it. I mean, if I do well, I do well, and fingers crossed I can, but as long as I'm there, I'll take it all in, and I'll just enjoy the time there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've always
for the holiday, basically.
No, it sounds good. I've always maintained that Worlds like the ECC and Nationals and stuff like that it's so kind of big and so much of a crapshoot that you might do well, but if you go in the expectation of doing well, you're probably going to have a miserable weekend. Yeah,
exactly. So I'll take every match that comes. I mean, if I don't do well, I'm not going to drop out, regardless. If I'm OX, then I'll just continue playing. It doesn't matter to me. I'll just see how it goes.
I didn't drop when I went to Worlds. Although for the first 4 rounds, every person I played, every person I beat at Worlds 2012, I had 4 wins. Every single person I beat dropped straight after I beat them, which I don't think is a good sign.
Yeah, I think that's just silly. I think, but I don't know. Maybe these players have gone to multiple Worlds or something like that. They've seen it, done it. But, yeah, first time for me. Make the most of it.
Indeed, and you'll never be as bad as Tommy Roberts' 0-4 drop in 2011. So
you never know. Well, it won't be it'll be OX and then just continue. It'll just be OX. It won't even be drop.
Everyone wins eventually, and as soon as you get that first win, you're better than Tommy.
Yeah, exactly. That's the aim.
So the last question. I mean, obviously you've only been playing a little while, so I'm sure we know the answer to this one. But are there any plans to kind of slow down or stop in the future, or are we full speed ahead trying to get another invite next year?
I think again, like I'm just finishing my last year of my masters at university, so it depends. If I have a job and I have to sort of focus on that, then it'll be slowed down a bit. But I'll try to get to as many tournaments as possible. Just basically, if I do well for the first few early tournaments, yeah, maybe I might go for it. But if not, then I'll probably just look to the nationals and maybe ECC again, just for a bit of fun, hang out with my mates and stuff like that. That's my aim, basically.
Sounds like a good plan. So, well, thank you very much for your time and good luck at Worlds.
Yeah, cheers, man. Thanks for the interview.
And once again, a huge thank you to those chaps for providing us with an interview. It is always appreciated. I love it when people are willing to help out with the podcast. Makes me feel a little bit validated. Next week, you will have another, hopefully, assuming I can get it all worked out, of course, another 2 interviews from UK Worlds qualifiers. And my plan next week is to do a nice little special where we get both the finalists of UK Nationals, who earned their paid invites at Nationals, Mr. Sam McClure and Mr. Scott Burgess, on the podcast, but I'll have to see. They've both agreed to do the interviews because they are lovely people, but we'll have to see in terms of schedules and whether I can actually track them down and get them on the podcast by this time next week. But I will hopefully get them a couple of people on if I can't get them. So hopefully I've kept you up to date on the news and the international nationals. Hopefully I wasn't too mean with my rant about supporters, but trust me, ladies and gentlemen, if you play 10 or 11 supporters and a Powell pad, you are going to draw dead a lot more than you would like. And I hope you enjoyed the interviews with those lovely people. As always, if you've got a question about anything, tweet me at the Wassy, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or if you're listening on SoundCloud or YouTube or WordPress or anything like that, just leave a comment down below and I will get back to you. Don't forget to check out my YouTube channel. I am updating it with several new videos a week. I'm putting a lot of time and effort into that at the moment, and my views and subscribers, etc. are growing heartily, which makes me very happy, but I will get lazy if people stop watching. So make sure you get over there, subscribe, watch all my videos. You know how this works by now, ladies and gentlemen. And all that's left to say is thank you very much for listening. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.